He had found out 2 nights ago, in the dim glow of his laptop screen at 3 a.m., the kind of hour when regrets crawl out from under the bed like ghosts. Jackson, his fiancé of 3 years, the man who'd whispered promises against his neck in the salt-kissed mornings of their shared beach house, was tangled in sheets that didn't belong to them. Not with some faceless stranger, but with Harlan Hawthorne, Eli's own father, the iron-fisted patriarch who'd built an empire on lobster traps and real estate deals, the man who'd never once said, "I love you," without a caveat. The video was grainy, time-stamped from the family cabin up in Acadia, but the moans were unmistakable, the betrayal a knife twist that left Eli gasping on the cold tile floor of the kitchen. Now, here they were, vows exchanged in whispers that tasted like ash. Jackson slid the platinum band onto Eli's finger, his voice steady as he recited the lines they'd rehearsed 100 times. "I promise to stand by you, through every storm and calm, to build a life that's ours alone." Eli's laugh bubbled up then, bitter and unbidden, cutting through the hush like shattered glass. The guests shifted, murmurs rippling like waves on the pews. His mother, Lydia, with her pearls clutched tight. His sister, Mara, eyes wide behind her veil. Old family friends who'd known the Hawthorns since before the war. Eli held up the program, the QR code glinting under the chandelier light, and said, simply, "Scan this. All of you. See what eternity really looks like." The first phone buzzed to life in Aunt Clara's hand, her face draining to the color of clam chowder left too long on the stove. Gasps followed, a chain reaction as screens lit up the nave like fireflies in hell. There it was, the video, hosted on an anonymous server Eli had linked just hours before, looping the forbidden embrace. Jackson's hands on Harlan's chest, Harlan's growl low and possessive, words slurring into confessions Eli had never wanted to hear. "You're the only one who gets me," Jackson murmured on the tape, and Harlan replied, "Then leave him. We end this charade." The congregation erupted, chairs scraping, voices rising in a cacophony that drowned the rain outside. Eli didn't flinch. He turned to Jackson, whose perfect features had cracked like cheap porcelain, eyes pleading now, mouth opening on words that wouldn't come. "You think I didn't know?" Eli said, his voice low, laced with the ache of a boy who'd spent his life chasing approval from men who couldn't give it. The late nights at the office, the business trips to Boston, Dad's sudden interest in your career. I pieced it together like one of his damn puzzles, the ones he left half-solved on the table to teach me resilience. He stepped closer, the scent of Jackson's cologne, sandalwood and sea salt, twisting the knife deeper. "But resilience? That's just code for swallowing lies until they choke you." Harlan rose from the front row, his broad frame casting a shadow that swallowed the light, face thunderous as he stormed the altar. "Elias, enough. This is madness." His voice boomed, the same timbre that had commanded boardrooms and broken spirits, but Eli met it with a gaze forged in the forge of quiet rebellion. "Madness? No, Dad. This is clarity. The kind you two have been peddling in shadows while I planned our perfect life." He pulled the ring from his finger, dropping it into the chalice on the altar with a clink that echoed like a gavel. "I loved you, Jackson. God help me, I did. But love isn't a transaction. It's not shares in Hawthorne Holdings or alibis in the guest room." The doors burst open then, wind whipping in off the harbor, carrying the cry of gulls like accusatory witnesses. Mara was on her feet, tears carving tracks through her makeup, reaching for Eli as if to pull him back from the edge. But he was already falling, into the truth, into the raw pulse of his own heart, unmoored and alive for the first time in years. As the video played on, confessions spilling from tinny speakers, Eli walked out into the storm, the program fluttering from his hand like a white flag of surrender. Behind him, the family he'd known dissolved into chaos, lies unraveling thread by thread. And in the downpour, tasting salt that wasn't just rain, Eli whispered to the empty air, finally free. But freedom, he would learn, was a double-edged tide, pulling you under before it sets you adrift. The salt air of Haven Point clung to Eli's skin like a second skin as he stumbled down the cobblestone path from St. Augustine's, the church bells tolling behind him like a dirge for the man he used to be. Water streamed from his hair, soaking the crisp linen shirt that now felt like a shroud, but he didn't stop. Not when Mara's voice cracked through the gale, calling his name. Not when the first sirens wailed from the direction of the harbor, as if the town itself mourned the scandal. Haven Point was small, the kind of place where secrets fermented like moonshine in basements, and this one? It would curdle the whole damn batch. He made it to the old lighthouse at the point, the one his grandfather had tended before the automation came, its beam cutting through the fog like a judgment. Collapsing against the rusted railing, Eli let the sobs come. Deep, wrenching things that shook his frame and left him hollowed out. 28 years old, and what did he have? A law degree gathering dust in his father's firm, a beach house half paid for with blood money from Hawthorne deals, and a heart scarred by men who'd seen him as a placeholder, a pretty distraction from their own hungers. Jackson had been the spark, the one who'd made him believe in something softer than the granite cliffs of Maine. They'd met at a bonfire on Crescent Beach 3 summers back, Jackson with his surfboard under one arm and a grin that lit the night, drawing Eli out of his shell with stories of California dreams and late-night drives down the Pacific Coast Highway. "I want to build something real," Jackson had said that first night, their fingers brushing over a shared bottle of whiskey, the firelight dancing in his hazel eyes. And Eli, starved for connection after years of his father's cold silences and his mother's pill-popping distractions, had fallen hard. They'd moved in together within months, Jackson climbing the ranks at Hawthorne Holdings with a charm that masked his ambition, Eli quietly handling the pro bono cases for the fishermen losing their livelihoods to corporate trawlers. It was supposed to be their story, a love carved from the rugged beauty of the coast, resilient as the pines bending in the wind. But cracks had spiderwebbed early, if he'd only looked. Jackson's eyes lingering too long on Harlan during family dinners, the way his father would clap a hand on Jackson's shoulder, lingering, possessive. Eli had chalked it up to mentorship, the old man finally approving of someone in his son's life. Harlan Hawthorne, at 56, was a force, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, with a voice that could negotiate a merger or silence a room. He'd built the family fortune from nothing, after his own father drowned in a squall off Monhegan Island, and he'd raised Eli with the creed, "Hawthorns endure. We don't break." Irony, Eli thought now, bitter as brine, that the man who'd preached endurance had shattered him without a second thought. His phone buzzed in his pocket, insistent as a hornet, but he ignored it, watching the waves churn below. The lighthouse steps creaked under approaching footsteps, and he tensed, half expecting Jackson or Harlan to chase him down with excuses wrapped in apologies. Instead, it was Finn Callahan. Finn, with his lanky frame and mop of red hair, the childhood friend who'd always been there, quiet as the tide pools, pulling Eli back from the brink without fanfare. "Eli," Finn said, voice rough from the wind, shrugging off his jacket to drape over Eli's shoulders. At 30, Finn was the steady one, owner of the little bookstore on Elm Street, shelves crammed with dog-eared paperbacks and the faint smell of coffee from the attached cafe. They'd grown up together, skipping stones on the jetty, sharing secrets under the stars, until life pulled them apart. Eli to college in Boston, Finn staying to nurse his own wounds after his parents' divorce split the town like a fault line. There had been a kiss once, tentative and teenage, under the bleachers at a high school football game, but Eli had pulled away, scared of what it meant in a place where whispers could drown you. Now, Finn's green eyes searched his, steady as the lighthouse beam. "I saw the posts. The whole town's blowing up. You okay?" Eli barked a laugh that dissolved into a choke. "Okay. My fiancé's been screwing my father, Finn, for months, maybe years, and I just aired their dirty laundry to 200 people on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life." He slid down the railing, knees buckling, and Finn knelt with him, close enough that Eli could smell the ink and rain on his skin. "You did what you had to," Finn murmured, hand hovering before settling on Eli's arm, warm and grounding. "Lies like that, they poison everything. Better out in the light." They sat like that as the storm eased, the rain softening to a mist that veiled the horizon. Finn didn't push for details, just listened when Eli finally spilled. The late-night email from an anonymous tipster, the video download that had him retching into the sink, the sleepless hours scripting the QR code link like a suicide note for his old life. "I wanted them to feel it," Eli confessed, voice raw. "The exposure. The way it burns when the mask slips." Finn nodded, his own past a shadow between them. Out since 16, disowned briefly by his father before the old man came around, sheepish and sorry. "It hurts like hell, but it's the only way to breathe again. Come on. My place. Dry clothes, strong coffee. No judgments." Eli let himself be pulled up, leaning into Finn's side as they trudged back through the emptying streets. Haven Point at twilight was a watercolor blur, gas lamps flickering on Main, the lobster shack shuttered early, whispers chasing them like fog. By the time they reached Finn's apartment above the bookstore, a cozy nest of mismatched furniture and overflowing bookshelves, the weight had shifted, not lifted, but shared. Finn brewed tea instead of coffee, chamomile with honey, and they curled on the worn leather couch, the patter of residual rain on the tin roof a lullaby. "Tell me something true," Eli said suddenly, staring at the steam rising from his mug. "Something that isn't broken." Finn hesitated, then smiled faintly, the kind that crinkled his eyes. "I kept that comic you drew me in high school. The one with the superhero who fights shadows with light. It's taped inside the cover of my favorite Sandman volume. Reminds me we're all just trying to illuminate the dark." Eli's chest tightened, not with pain this time, but something softer, like dawn creeping over the bay. For the first time since the altar, he felt seen, not as Harlan's son or Jackson's betrothed, but as Elias, flawed and fierce. As night deepened, conversation ebbed into silence, comfortable as an old blanket, and when Eli's head lolled onto Finn's shoulder, neither pulled away. Outside, the town simmered with scandal, but here, in this small sanctuary, a new story whispered its beginning. Dawn broke over Haven Point like a reluctant confession, painting the harbor in hues of rose and steel, the fishing boats bobbing like survivors after a squall. Eli woke to the scent of fresh scones baking downstairs, Finn's domain, and for a moment, the ache in his chest dulled to a throb. He stretched on the lumpy couch, joints protesting the night's contortions, and padded to the window overlooking Elm Street. The town was stirring. Old Man Whitaker hosing down the sidewalk outside the bakery, Mrs. Ellis walking her terrier with a newspaper tucked under her arm, headlines no doubt screaming the Hawthorne Reed implosion. Eli's phone, silenced but stacked with notifications, lay like a grenade on the coffee table. He ignored it, drawn instead to the kitchen where Finn hummed an old folk tune, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting his forearms like fresh snow. "Morning," Finn said, glancing up with that easy warmth, sliding a plate across the scarred oak table. "Cranberry orange. Your favorite, if memory serves." Eli sank into a chair, the normalcy a balm. "You remember that?" He took a bite, the tart burst grounding him, and for the first time in days, hunger stirred, not for revenge, but for sustenance. "Something stick." Finn poured coffee, black as the Atlantic depths, and joined him, their knees brushing under the table in the cramped space. Silence settled, companionable, broken only by the distant cry of gulls. But Eli's mind churned, replaying the church chaos, Jackson's ashen face, Harlan's bellowed threats, Lydia's collapse into Mara's arms. His mother, fragile Lydia, with her vintage dresses and Valium prescriptions, had always been the glue, pretending the family's fractures were just hairline cracks. Now, she'd be picking up the shards alone. "I should go to her," Eli said finally, setting down his fork, "before the vultures descend." Finn nodded, no argument, just a quiet, "Want company?" The drive to the Hawthorne estate wound through pine thickets and salt marshes. The old Buick's radio tuned low to NPR, stories of coastal erosion mirroring Eli's inner erosion. Finn drove, letting Eli navigate the turns he knew by heart, the hairpin before Widow's Cove, the straightaway past the Blueberry Barrens. The estate loomed at the end of Oyster Lane, a sprawling Victorian with turrets like sentinels, wraparound porch sagging under ivy. Once a symbol of triumph, now it felt like a mausoleum. Lydia answered the door before Eli's knock fully landed, her silk robe askew, eyes red-rimmed, but makeup intact, a Hawthorne through and through. "Elias," she breathed, pulling him into an embrace that smelled of lavender and regret. Mara hovered behind, 25 and fierce, her wedding dress from yesterday swapped for jeans and a hoodie, arms crossed like armor. They gathered in the sunroom, sunlight slanting through leaded glass onto the wicker settee, tea service trembling on the tray. Lydia's hands shook as she poured, spilling a drop that she dabbed with a linen napkin. "Your father. He left for Boston last night. Said it was business, but we both know." Her voice cracked, the first real fracture Eli had seen in her polished facade. Mara leaned forward, elbows on knees. "And Jackson? Packed his things from your place at dawn. Took the Porsche. Left a note." She slid it across, scrawled apology, promises of therapy, a plea for forgiveness that read like a press release. Eli crumpled it, the paper cutting into his palm like tiny accusations. "I don't want his sorry," Eli said, voice steady despite the storm inside. "I want to understand why. Why him? Why now?" Lydia's gaze dropped to her lap, fingers twisting a pearl ring. Harlan's gift from their 25th anniversary. Your father. He's always chased what he couldn't have. The business, the respect. You. She swallowed, the word hanging heavy. He loves you, Elias, in his way. But Jackson. He saw something familiar in him. Ambition. Youth. The things Harlan lost when he settled. The room tilted, Eli's world refracting through fresh pain. Finn, silent sentinel in the corner armchair, reached out a hand, squeezing Eli's knee under the table, a touch that anchored without intruding. Mara noticed, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she said nothing, just launched into logistics. Canceling the honeymoon suite in Bar Harbor, fielding calls from the caterers, the florist who'd already posted blurry altar pics on Instagram. As the morning wore on, confessions trickled out like leaks in a dike. Lydia admitted the suspicions, the hushed arguments, Harlan's cologne on Jackson's shirts left in the laundry. Mara revealed she'd confronted Jackson weeks ago, only to be gaslit into doubt. I should have told you, she whispered, guilt etching lines on her young face. But I thought, family first. Family, Eli echoed, the word tasting sour. What does that even mean when it's built on sand? By noon, the estate felt claustrophobic, ghosts in every corner. The framed photo of Eli and Harlan on the mantel, father-son fishing trip when Eli was 10, smiles stiff as starched collars. He slipped out to the back garden, the rose arbor where he'd proposed to Jackson under a harvest moon, petals now scattered like confetti from a funeral. Finn followed, wordless, and they walked the gravel paths in tandem, the crunch underfoot a rhythm to their silence. You holding up? Finn asked at last, plucking a wilted bloom and twirling it absently. Eli shrugged, kicking a pebble into the koi pond. Like a buoy in a hurricane. Battered, but floating. He paused, turning to face Finn, the sunlight catching the freckles across his nose. Why are you here? Really, you don't owe me this. Finn's expression softened, vulnerability flickering like bioluminescence in the shallows. Because I've been where you are. And because, that kiss under the bleachers? It wasn't just teenage curiosity for me. I walked away because I thought you deserved the world, not a small-town mess like me. He stepped closer, the air between them charged, alive. But seeing you yesterday, standing tall in that storm. Damn, Eli, you're the light I never stopped chasing. The admission hung, fragile as sea glass, and Eli's breath caught. He reached out, fingers tracing the line of Finn's jaw, the stubble rough under his touch. Their lips met then, tentative at first, then deepening with the hunger of years unspoken. A kiss that tasted of scones and salt, of second chances blooming in the ruins. When they broke apart, foreheads pressed, Eli whispered, maybe we rewrite the story. Together. Back inside, the women waited, plans sketched on legal pads. Divorce filings for Lydia, a restraining order if needed, therapy circles for the family that might salvage. But as Eli drove away with Finn, the estate shrinking in the rear view, he felt the tide turning. Not toward vengeance, but toward healing, one honest breath at a time. The road ahead curved toward unknown horizons, but for the first time, Eli wasn't navigating alone. The days blurred into a haze of salt-streaked windows and half-packed boxes, Haven Point's autumn chill seeping through the cracks of Eli's beach house, like uninvited memories. He'd returned there after the garden kiss, Finn's truck idling at the curb until Eli waved him off with a promise of dinner. Tomorrow, maybe, when the dust settled. But dust didn't settle. It swirled, kicked up by the endless churn of fallout. Reporters from the Bangor Daily News parked outside the Lobster Shack, angling for quotes from waitresses who'd served Jackson mimosas just last week. Harlan's board sent curt emails, indefinite leave pending investigation. Jackson vanished into the ether, radio silence broken only by a single text. I'm sorry. Please, let's talk. Eli deleted it without reply, channeling the rage into purging the house. Jackson's surf magazines consigned to the recycling bin, his cologne bottles shattered against the deck railing, shards glinting like accusations in the moonlight. The beach became his confessional, midnight walks where the waves whispered absolution, foam licking his bare feet as he screamed into the void until his throat burned. Finn checked in daily, texts laced with dry humor, found a first edition Whitman at the shop, leaves of grass for your growing pains, or deliveries of chowder from the wharf, left on the porch with notes, fuel for the fire. One evening, as copper leaves skittered across the dunes, Eli found himself at Callahan's Books, the bell above the door jingling like a hesitant invitation. The shop was a haven of slanted shelves and ladder-back chairs, air heavy with the musk of aged pages and fresh ground beans from the espresso machine humming in the corner. Finn was restocking the poetry section, balancing a tower of volumes, his flannel shirt untucked and sleeves pushed to elbows, revealing forearms corded from hauling crates. "Escaping the circus?" Finn asked, spotting him, a grin breaking through the fatigue etched around his eyes. "Something like that." Eli wandered the aisles, fingers trailing spines, Kerouac's road-worn wanderings, Baldwin's unflinching truths, until he settled in the window nook, a faded armchair overlooking the street where horse chestnut trees shed their burdens. Finn joined him after closing, flipping the sign to closed with a decisive click, and they shared a pot of Earl Grey, steam curling like secrets. Conversation meandered from the mundane, the new indie band playing at the VFW hall, to the marrow, Finn's quiet coming out at 17, the fistfight with his cousin that left him with a scar above his eyebrow, the years of rebuilding with his dad over fishing lines and unspoken apologies. "I learned you can't force the current," Finn said, tracing the scar absently. "But you can learn to swim with it." Eli leaned back, the chair creaking under him, and let the words sink in. "I keep replaying it, you know? Not the video, that's seared in, but the before. How I ignored the signs because I wanted the fairy tale. The white picket fence on the bluff, Jackson and me adopting a rescue mutt, growing old yelling at tourists." His voice thickened, the romantic in him warring with the realist. Was it ever real? Or just me, projecting onto a canvas? Finn set his mug down, green eyes steady. "It was real for you. That's what matters. And the parts that weren't? They don't erase the man you are, the one who fights for the underdog in court, who sketches comics in the margins of depositions, who makes this town feel a little less lonely." He reached across the gap, hand covering Eli's, thumb stroking the knuckles in a rhythm that steadied the spin. "You're not defined by their shadows, Eli. You're the damn light." Heat bloomed in Eli's chest, spreading like dawn over the bay, and he turned his palm up, lacing their fingers. The kiss that followed was slower than the garden's urgency, exploratory, tasting of bergamot and possibility. Finn's lips were soft, insistent, mapping Eli's with a patience born of longing, hands cupping his face as if he were a fragile tome. When they parted, breathless, Eli rested his forehead against Finn's, the world narrowing to the press of bodies, the faint tick of the wall clock. "Stay," Finn murmured, not a question but an offering, and Eli did, the upstairs apartment a cocoon of exposed brick and threadbare rugs. They moved to the bedroom with the grace of rediscovery, clothes shed like old skins, touches reverent, tracing scars both seen and unseen. Finn's body was a landscape of freckles and lean muscle, earned from shelving books and weekend hikes up Cadillac Mountain. Eli's, slimmer, marked by a tattoo on his ribcage, a compass rose inked after law school, pointing true north. They fit together like puzzle pieces long separated, size mingling with the creak of floorboards, the night unfolding in waves of tenderness and fire. After, tangled in sheets that smelled of lavender detergent, Eli traced patterns on Finn's chest, heartbeats sinking in the quiet. "What if this is just a rebound?" he whispered, fear coiling like fog. Finn shifted, propping on an elbow, gaze unwavering. "Then it's the best kind, the kind that reminds you you're alive. But I don't think it is. I think it's us, finally catching the current." Sleep came fitful, dreams laced with altar echoes and QR code flashes, but Finn's arm around his waist anchored him through the tremors. Morning brought pancakes and plotting, Eli's resignation from the firm, drafted on Finn's ancient typewriter, a road trip south, maybe to Portland for a fresh start, or deeper into the unknown. But mid-bite, Eli's phone shattered the idyll. A call from Mara, voice urgent, "Dad's back. And he's not alone. Come home, Eli, before it all burns down." The drive was a gauntlet of goldenrod fields and looming pines, tension thick as the humidity rising off the marshes. Finn gripped the wheel, knuckles white, while Eli stared out at the passing lobster buoys, red and white sentinels bobbing in the swell. The estate appeared unchanged from the outside, porch swings swaying gently, but inside, the air crackled with unspoken thunder. Harlan stood in the study, tumbler of scotch in hand, Jackson at his side, not defiant but diminished, shadows under his eyes like bruises. "Elias," Harlan rumbled, setting the glass down with a thud that echoed his authority. "We need to talk. As a family." Eli crossed the threshold, Finn a step behind, his presence a silent bulwark. "Family," he repeated, The word a weapon now. Last time we played that game, I ended up with a front row seat to your affair. What's the encore? Jackson's gaze flicked to him, pleading. Eli, please. It was a mistake. A lapse. I love you. The lie landed like a slap, and Eli laughed, sharp and hollow. Love? You don't even know what that word means. He turned to Harlan, the man who'd loomed large in his psyche, now diminished by the light of truth. And you, my father, the one who taught me to fight dirty in negotiations, to bury the weak. Was I just collateral? A way to keep up appearances while you chased your midlife ghost? Harlan's face hardened, but cracks showed, tremor in his hand, flicker of shame in his steel blue eyes, so like Eli's own. I built this for you, boy. The legacy. Jackson understood that. He saw the bigger picture. Finn stepped forward then, voice calm but edged. The bigger picture? Or just your ego? The room stilled, Harlan's glare shifting to the interloper, but Finn held ground. Eli's not your pawn. He's a man who deserves honesty, not your boardroom bullshit. The confrontation escalated, words flying like gulls in a gale, accusations of betrayal, pleas for reconciliation, Harlan's roar giving way to a broken admission. I was lost, Elias. After your mother. The pills, the distance. Jackson was a spark in the dark. Jackson nodded, tears spilling, but Eli saw it for what it was, self-preservation, not contrition. By the end, lines were drawn. Lydia filing papers with a resolve Eli had never seen, Mara siding with her brother, the firm fracturing under whispers. Eli walked out with Finn, the study door clicking shut like a full stop. In the driveway, under a sky bruised with clouds, Eli pulled Finn close, the kiss fierce, claiming, "Thank you," he breathed, "for seeing me." The road called, but for now, they lingered, two souls forging ahead in the wreckage, love not a fairy tale, but a hard-won harbor. Winter crept into Haven Point like an uninvited guest, frosting the windows of the beach house with intricate lace and turning the harbor into a mirror of ice-rimmed buoys. Eli and Finn had settled into a rhythm there, a tentative domesticity woven from shared suppers and late-night reads. Finn with his mystery novels, Eli sketching legal briefs interspersed with charcoal portraits of the man who now shared his bed. The scandal had ebbed from tabloid fodder to local legend, whispered in bars over pints of Allagash White, but the scars lingered, etched deeper with each anonymous letter or sidelong glance at the post office. One sleet-lashed afternoon, Eli stood at the drafting table in the sun porch, pencil hovering over a half-finished drawing of Finn asleep, the curve of his shoulder a study in vulnerability. The firm was a memory now. He'd hung out his shingle as a solo advocate for the working stiffs, divorcees, evictees, the forgotten backbone of the coast. His office a corner of Finn's bookstore, files stacked beside dog-eared copies of To Kill a Mockingbird. It felt right. This smaller scale, the case is personal, laced with the empathy he'd clawed from his own gutting. Finn burst in then, cheeks ruddy from the cold, shaking snow from his scarf like a Labrador after a swim. Mail call, he announced, tossing a bundle onto the table, bills, junk, and a crisp envelope embossed with the Hawthorne crest. Eli's stomach nodded, but he slid it open, Harlan's handwriting, spare and commanding, inviting him to the estate for closure. No apology, just coordinates for a neutral ground, the old cabin in Acadia, where the video had been filmed, irony thick as the pines. You going? Finn asked, brewing tea at the hot plate, his back a familiar silhouette against the frosted panes. Eli folded the letter, the paper crackling like dry leaves. Yeah, not for him. For me. To bury the ghost. They drove north the next dawn, the Buick's heater wheezing against the chill, Acadia's peaks shrouded in mist like ancient sentinels. The cabin squatted by a frozen lake, logs weathered silver, chimney puffing reluctant smoke. Harlan waited on the porch, bundled in wool, a thermos of coffee in hand. No Jackson, no entourage, just the man stripped to his bones. His face had hollowed since the wedding, jowls sagging, eyes shadowed by nights Eli could only imagine. Elias, Harlan said, voice gravelly, extending the thermos like an olive branch. Coffee. They sat on Adirondack chairs, steam rising between them, the silence heavy with unsaid indictments. Harlan stared at the lake, where ice cracked faintly under the sun's insistence. I came here as a boy with your granddad. Taught me to bait a hook, to read the wind. Thought I'd pass that on clean. He paused, breath fogging the air. Failed you there. Eli sipped the coffee, bitter and black, mirroring the churn inside. Failure? That's generous. Try devastation. The words spilled then, unfiltered, the boy who'd idolized his father, mimicking his stride, his rhetoric, only to find the pedestal rotten. You made me doubt everything. My judgment, my heart. Because if I could miss that. Harlan winced, the motion alien on his stern features. Jackson was a mirror, ambitious, hungry, reminded me of the man I buried under suits and spreadsheets. He met Eli's gaze, raw for the first time. But you're the best of us. Lydia's grace, my grit. I pushed because I feared you'd soften, float away like dandelion seeds. Never saw I was the one adrift. The admission cracked something in Eli, not forgiveness yet, but understanding, a bridge over the chasm. They talked for hours, the sun climbing, thawing the ice in patches. Harlan's own youth, a closeted fling with a summer deckhand cut short by his father's rage. The marriage to Lydia, a compromise wrapped in love. The affair as a desperate grasp at lost fire. I ended it, Harlan said flatly. Jackson too. He's in Portland now, some startup. We both needed to burn it down. Eli nodded, the weight shifting. And us? Can we rebuild? Harlan's hand, calloused from years at the helm, clapped his shoulder, hesitant, then firm. If you'll have me. Not as kingpin, as dad. They parted with a hug, awkward but real, the cabin fading in the rear view as Eli and Finn wound back south. Finn had waited in the truck, giving space, but now his hand found Eli's thigh, a silent query. Progress. Earthquake, Eli replied, leaning into the touch. But maybe the kind that levels for foundations. Back in Haven Point, spring hinted at the edges, crocuses pushing through snow, longer days gilding the bay. Eli threw himself into work, winning a settlement for a widow against a trawler conglomerate, the payout funding a community legal aid fund in his grandfather's name. Finn's shop thrived too, hosting readings where locals shared stories of resilience. Divorce tales, coming out chronicles. Eli emceeing one night, his voice steady as he introduced a poet with ink-stained fingers. Their love deepened in the quiet hours, lazy Sundays in bed, Finn's head on Eli's chest, debating plot twists over takeout from the Thai place on Wharf Road. Hikes along the cliff trails, hands linked, the oceans roared drowning doubts. But shadows lingered, nights when Eli bolted awake, the QR codes glow haunting his dreams, or Finn's rare silences, born of old fears that Eli might tire of the small life. One such night, after a fundraiser at the VFW, candlelit tables, fiddle music lilting, Eli found Finn on the deck, staring at the stars wheeling overhead. Penny for him, Eli said, sliding arms around his waist from behind, chin on shoulder. Finn leaned back, solid. Just this. Us. Feels like a gift, but gifts can get revoked. His voice held the echo of abandonment, the divorce that had taught him love's fragility. Eli turned him gently, cupping his face in the moonlight. Not this one. I choose you, Finn Callahan. Book dust fingerprints, terrible puns, and all. Every day. The kiss sealed it, passionate, pledging, bodies pressing close until the chill drove them inside. Yet fate, capricious as a nor'easter, tested them. A week later, Mara called, breathless. Jackson. He's back. Says he wants to make amends. Publicly. At the town hall meeting tomorrow. The air thickened, old wounds reopening, and Eli wondered if closure was a myth, or if true freedom meant facing the storm once more. The town hall loomed like a weathered barnacle on Haven Point's civic heart, its clapboard facade strung with bunting for the annual spring forum. Debates on dock fees, erosion barriers, the pulse of a community clinging to its edges. Eli arrived with Finn at dusk, the parking lot a gravel mosaic under sodium lamps, pickup trucks and sedans nosed together like gossiping neighbors. Inside, the air hummed with folding chairs and the faint tang of coffee urns, locals filing in with styrofoam cups and skeptical frowns. Harlan was there already, front row with Lydia, their hands linked in a show of unity that felt more truce than triumph. Mara waved from the side, her nod a buoy in the crowd. Eli and Finn claimed seats midway, thighs brushing in the narrow row, Finn's pinky hooking Eli's in a subtle anchor. The meeting kicked off routine, selectmen's reports on lobster quotas, a plea for volunteers at the food pantry, but tension coiled when Jackson Reed stepped to the mic, polished as ever in chinos and a blazer, hair artfully tousled, the ghost of California's sun in his tan. Ladies and gentlemen, Jackson began, voice smooth as harbor oil. I'm Jackson Reed, and I've come home to make things right. Murmurs rippled, heads craning, some sympathetic, others sharpening pitchfork stares. He launched into a monologue, scripted with the precision of a TED Talk. Regrets over the affair, therapy sessions in Portland, a vow to rebuild trust brick by brick. His eyes sought Eli's, lingering with manufactured remorse. I hurt the man I loved most. And his family. For that, I'm deeply sorry. The room held its breath, a collective inhale, waiting for Eli's cue. He felt it, the pull to stand, to forgive publicly, to knit the social fabric with a magnanimous nod. Finn's grip tightened, a whisper escaping. Your call. But Eli rose instead, deliberate, the chair scraping like a challenge. All eyes swiveled, the selectman pausing mid-sentence. Jackson, Eli said, voice carrying clear to the rafters. Words are cheap. We've all heard vows before, mine included, remember? A titter escaped the back, quickly stifled. You talk of rebuilding, but what about the foundation? The lies that eroded it from the start. He stepped forward, the aisle a gauntlet, Finn rising to flank him. I appreciate the effort. Really, but amends aren't a speech. They're actions, in the quiet, when no one's clapping. Jackson faltered, mic trembling slightly, his facade cracking under the weight of authenticity. Eli, I want to try? For us. There is no us, Eli replied, gentle but firm, the finality a release. But there's you, figuring it out. And me, moving on. Applause erupted then, sporadic at first, then swelling, not for drama, but for truth, the town exhaling in communal catharsis. Harlan stood next, clearing his throat into the hush. My son's right. Words fail when actions betray. His gaze met Eli's, steady, the bridge they'd built in Acadia Holding. Hawthorne Holdings is donating to the Legal Aid Fund, Elias's fund. And I'm stepping back. Time for new hands at the tiller. The meeting dissolved into chatter, handshakes, a cider toast in the lobby where Lydia pulled Eli into a fierce hug. Proud of you, she murmured, tears salting his collar. Mara joined, the siblings linked arm in arm, laughing over the absurdity, a family reforged, imperfect but present. Outside, under a canopy of stars pricked through the overcast, Finn waited, leaning against the Buick with that lopsided smile. Hero of the hour, he teased, pulling Eli close as snow flurries danced tentative. Just a guy done with scripts, Eli countered, nuzzling into Finn's neck, the warmth seeping bone deep. They drove home slow, windows cracked to the crisp bite, radio crooning Springsteen, Thunder Road, an anthem of escape and embrace. At the beach house, they built a fire in the pit, flames crackling against the night, blankets wrapped shared as they toasted marshmallows charred to perfection. You know, Finn said, licking sugar from his thumb, this town's got its claws, but it's home. And with you, it feels like the right shore. Eli nodded, head on Finn's shoulder, the ocean's murmur a lullaby. No more hiding, no more masks. Just this. Us, real as the tide. Months unfurled like kelp in the current. Eli's practice blooming with clients drawn by his story, Finn expanding the shop into a community hub with queer-lit nights and writing workshops. Harlan visited Sundays, awkward barbecues on the porch evolving into deep talks over checkers, Lydia bringing pies laced with stories of her own quiet rebellions. Jackson faded into occasional postcards, progress reports from afar, a nod to mutual healing without entanglement. One golden August eve, as fireflies blinked over the dunes, Eli led Finn blindfolded down the path to the spot where they'd first rekindled, the lighthouse dock, now strung with lanterns like captured stars. Slipping the cloth free, he dropped to one knee, a simple silver band glinting in his palm, etched with a compass rose to match his tattoo. Finn Callahan, he said, voice thick with the depth of it all. You pulled me from the undertow. Be my north, my harbor, forever. Finn's eyes shimmered, hand trembling as he pulled Eli up into a kiss that sealed fates, the waves applauding below. Yes, he breathed. 1,000 times. Their wedding came in autumn's hush, a small affair on Crescent Beach, barefoot in the sand, Harlan walking Eli down the aisle of driftwood, Mara officiating with vows they'd co-written, raw and resonant. No QR codes, no programs, just love, laid bare under a sky vast as possibility. As they exchanged rings, the congregation, town folk, family, friends, raised glasses to toasts of resilience and reinvention. In the years that followed, Haven Point changed slow, like tides reshaping stone. A pride flag fluttering from the town hall, Eli's Aid Fund saving homes from foreclosure, Finn's shelves bending under tales of triumph. They adopted a mutt named Atlas, gray-muzzled and loyal, and talked of kids, fostering, maybe, giving roots to the uprooted. Betrayals became backstory, fuel for empathy rather than embers of rage. Eli learned that families aren't forged in perfection, but in the mending, the honest stitches after the rip. And in Finn's arms, under the same roof that had witnessed heartbreak, he found not just love, but liberty. To be seen, to be whole, to be unapologetically himself. The lies had destroyed nothing eternal. They'd cleared the way for truth to bloom, wild and enduring as the Maine coast.